let's talk about the Russo brothers. Woo! The Russos back, and they're gonna save Marvel. Hey now, the Russos back. So, the Russo brothers were asked about the upcoming Avengers films. Oh, baby. They said, these movies are going to be a surprise to people. A surprise. We found a way into the story that's very exciting to us, but very radical. I want you to think about that word, radical. Say it a couple times, let it roll off the tongue. Radical. I like the way my mouth moves when I say it, radical. But very radical. We think it's going to challenge the audiences. You love to hear that shit. I've been preaching this since they got on stage at San Diego Comic-Con. If you think they're just going to phone it in, you think they're just taking a big check and going to put out a bunch of dumpster fire Marvel movies with a 70-plus fucking characters in it and call it a day and fuck off to whatever other business endeavor they have, you're crazy. You're crazy. Let's look at this article over on The Direct. It summarizes a lot of stuff that the Russo brothers said. And I assume, by the way, it was the premiere of Electric State, which is a new movie that they have made. I believe Chris Pratt was in that movie, too, because he was also asked some stuff on the red carpet. But let's get into this. There's a lot in here. I have a lot to say. Avengers Doomsday gets exciting story update from director. Very radical. By the way, chat, what could be so radical? What do you think? Just throw it into the chat. What do you think? What could be so radical? What could challenge audiences? Maybe some of the things we've been speculating about? The article reads, at the premiere for the new movie, The Electric State, Joe Russo shared some insight on what kind of story Avengers Doomsday is looking to tell. Avengers Doomsday and the following Avengers Secret Wars will be Joe and Anthony's first return to the MCU since Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. The movies will also see the return of Robert Downey Jr. to the MCU, though as Doctor Doom rather than Iron Man. Joe Russo teases Avengers Doomsday plot. Speaking with The Hollywood Reporter at the premiere for The Electric State, Joe Russo, accompanied by his brother Anthony, teased an exciting and radical story in Avengers Doomsday, saying it will challenge audiences. Russo admitted to that answer what they are or are not looking for when it comes to new faces in the movie, probably be giving too much away. Still, he confirmed they are always looking for new faces, as there will always be new stories to tell. That's probably about the X-Men stuff. Anyway, he did tell Deadline in a different interview, though, that anybody in the Marvel bag could show up for this movie. Russo shared with THR that beyond the question of who will be in the movies, he thinks both Doomsday and Secret Wars will be a surprise to people. He explained that he feels they found a way into the story, and he described it as both exciting and radical. Radical. Ultimately, he believes it will challenge audiences. Here is the quote again. And I think these movies are going to be a surprise to people. We found a way into the story that's very exciting to us, but we think very radical. And I think it's going to challenge audiences. Expanding on this idea, he said, I think we found a way into the story that's going to be challenging for audiences. It's challenging for us to execute, and that's really exciting to us. Fascinating. Fascinating. Okay, so what does this mean? What could this possibly indicate? Well, I think the most important thing to bring up here and the thing to really focus on is that they have a story idea. Now, I think that's obvious, but to some of you, you don't believe it. There's some people out there, and of course, the community and I, we butt heads a lot about this RDJ Doctor Doom thing. Frankly, I'm very optimistic about RDJ Doctor Doom. I feel like I know what they're cooking. I'm very excited for what I think the story will be that the Russos are dealing with, right? And by the way, more of that was actually brought to light yesterday when Paul from Heavy Spoilers dropped a big spoiler video about something he heard about Secret Wars. I have a follow-up video to that video that's going to drop later today that's going to go into what Paul revealed and why that impacts a whole bunch of other rumors and things that we've been talking about. So it's all really, really juicy. But let's take it all back to the sort of fundamental core plays. There's a story here. This was something that the Russos recently spoke about when they said that at first McFeely was not really willing to do this. Do you guys remember that article? He asked about what they would even do. He initially said no, and then he thought about it all night, came up with an incredibly radical idea for the story, and that was their in. The way it was described was that it was something that activated the whole team. It got them all to not only want to make this movie, but to want to tell this difficult story, this really interesting thing that they were cooking with as far as Doomsday, Secret Wars, and how to deal with all of these characters, all of these emotions, etc. So, to me, I find it fascinating that they continue to talk about this idea. Now, last night, they give even more insight, more than they ever have before, talking about how this idea is going to surprise people. It's radical, and it's going to challenge audiences. Okay? So, surprising, radical, and going to challenge audiences. All right. Now, to me, this all has to do with RDJ's Doctor Doom and the idea of what the heroes were during the Infinity Saga. And I continue to believe that this RDJ Doctor Doom that we are actually going to see, he is more of an actual representation of what this Tony Stark character actually is. And I'm speaking to what I think will go down as maybe the biggest retcon and the biggest shocking surprise of maybe the last 50 years of pop culture. I think personally, this will be more shocking than Luke, I am your father, Darth Vader, and the Luke Skywalker reveal. And this reveal will essentially be that the person that we followed as Tony Stark during the Infinity Saga, he was never actually Tony Stark. Not by blood, anyway. He was actually a Victor Von Doom variant that was adopted by the Starks and raised as Tony Stark. Now, the reason that I mean, there's a million reasons why I think that's going on, but when I hear these new comments from the Russos, okay, and they're talking about surprising people, they're talking about being radical, and they're talking about challenging audiences, right? Well, all of a sudden, all three of those things work perfectly and exactly with what I think they are actually cooking. And the whole idea is something like nature versus nurture. What makes a hero? And I think what they're going to do is going to be such an interesting, intriguing, and shocking retcon of the Tony Stark character. And then they'll build up, I think, the fact that he was still Tony Stark via the Secret Wars film. Because essentially the question will be after Doomsday, well, this now is Doctor Doom. That guy was never Tony Stark. So did we ever even actually have a hero? Was he ever actually a hero? Or was he just Doom doing Doom shit the entire time? And it sort of recontextualizes a lot of what you thought was going on in the Infinity Saga. But ultimately, I think it will take us into a place where, regardless of the guy's DNA, regardless of who his biological parents were, he was Iron Man. Not because of being like born of Howard Stark and born of, you know, Howard's wife. No, but because he was raised as a Stark, became Iron Man, built the suit, you know, built the arc reactor, built Ultron, built all sorts of stuff. He ultimately is still Tony Stark. And that'll sort of be reinforced by the Secret Wars film and sort of overcoming that thing. But ultimately, that idea, that shocking, radical, challenging, surprising idea, I continue to believe is actually what they are cooking. And I think it is carrying them into really interesting character places. Now, I don't want to get into specific spoilers and leaks because there's other stuff, like basically I'm kind of hinting at the Dark Avengers, the OG versions of the Dark Avengers. We'll talk more about that in the video later today. But man, they are really cooking some radical shit. And basically I'm at a point where until the Russos open their mouths and say something that contradicts what I think is happening, I gotta continue to believe that it's real. I mean, guys, look, I know not all of you believe this, okay? I know not all of you believe that this is real, but you have to admit one thing. If you're gonna be fair about this, you gotta admit one thing. You have to admit that every new piece of info from the Russos, it actually does fit with my theory. Admit that at the very least. I don't know that 100% it's true. However, I'm telling you right now, every single time these guys open their mouths, it reaffirms my theory. Like, come on, man. You gotta admit, as vague as it is, surprising people, finding a way into a story that excites us, being radical and challenging the audience, you gotta admit, all of that fits perfectly with what I would consider to be the greatest retcon maybe ever in pop culture, and one of the most shocking things that will ever happen to a big brand and a big franchise and a big IP like this. One other last minute thing, one last thing on this, and then we'll move on to the Kathleen Kennedy stuff, because that's really why we're all here. That's what we're really excited to talk about. One more piece on this is, initially, Marvel Studios did not want to do whatever this was. Whatever the idea is that the Russos have, when they initially pitched it, Marvel said no. We know that. Okay? Now, I can't help but think that part of why is because they looked at the pitch and they were like, there's no way we can retcon the Tony Stark Iron Man thing. There's no way we can actually do that. It would be too risky. It would be too ballsy. It would be too crazy. But ultimately, maybe just there wasn't another good option. They ultimately decided to do it. Everybody's on board, and they're doing it right now. So, wow. This shit's crazy. So I wanted to bring that up. I'm obviously really excited about what the Russo brothers are doing. Thanks for watching. And if you like this clip, smash a like on the actual video and subscribe to this channel. That way more of these clips get into your feed. I've also linked the full episode below if you want to check out the entire thing, including the Q&A we do with fans. You can also watch this show live. We do it live Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And you can also find all of my content, including the videos I put on my main YouTube channel, on the podcast feed.